My name is Eleanor Vance, and for most of my 54 years, I have lived by the gentle currents of the Willamette River in a small, quiet house in Cedar Creek, Oregon. My life has been shaped by the landscape, the persistent soft rains of winter, the glorious, sun-drenched explosion of roses in June, and the quiet dignity of the evergreen forests that stand like silent sentinels on the horizon. I was a librarian for 30 years, a profession that suited my temperament perfectly. I found comfort in the hushed reverence of the stacks, in the scent of old paper and binding glue, in the quiet exchange of stories between the pages of a book and the heart of a reader. I raised my son, Leo, in that little house. His father, David, left when Leo was just 5, seeking a life with more sharp edges and brighter lights than our quiet town could offer. I don't hold much bitterness for him anymore. We were simply two different books bound in the same cover for a time. After he left, my world narrowed and deepened, its sole focus becoming the small, bright-eyed boy who held my hand and looked to me for everything. I poured all that I was into him. I worked extra shifts to afford the best art supplies for his burgeoning talent, spent weekends driving him to soccer tournaments all over the state, and celebrated every one of his triumphs, no matter how small, as if they were my own. My love for him was a vast and quiet ocean, and I believed its depths were boundless. He grew into a man who carried the best of the sunlight, with a charming smile and an easy grace that drew people to him. When he introduced me to Clara, I saw the way his eyes lit up, and I felt my own heart expand. She was vibrant and ambitious, a flash of bright color against the muted tones of our world. She worked in marketing, and she spoke of brand synergy and digital footprints with a passion I reserved for first editions. They seemed to be building a future together, a sleek and modern structure on the foundation I had so carefully laid. I wanted nothing more than to see him happy, and so I embraced her as my own. When they announced their engagement, my joy was as pure and simple as the rain-washed sky. They dreamed of a perfect wedding, a storybook affair nestled in the heart of the wine country. They showed me pictures of a sprawling vineyard estate, the Gilded Grape, with its ancient oak trees and rows of sun-kissed vines. It was a beautiful dream, but a costly one. Leo, a freelance graphic designer, and Clara, still climbing the ladder at her firm, had hearts full of ambition but wallets that were considerably lighter. "We'll pay you back, Mom, I swear," Leo had promised, his hand over his. "As soon as I land that big corporate account." "Of course you will, darling," I'd said, stroking his hair. But I never truly expected it. What was money compared to his happiness? It was a resource, like water or air, to be given freely to the person who was my everything. So I took a significant portion of my retirement savings, the money I had carefully cultivated like a prize-winning rose garden, and offered it to them. I signed the contracts, paid the deposits, and became the silent financial architect of their dream. The total for the venue, the artisanal caterer, the celebrated local photographer, and the string quartet came to just over $70,000. It was a staggering sum, but when I saw the joy on their faces, it felt like the soundest investment I had ever made. I believed I was not just paying for a party, I was investing in the foundation of their new life together. I never imagined that foundation would be built on top of my own heart, or that they would be the ones to orchestrate its shattering. The rehearsal dinner was held at the Arbor Inn, a historic lodge nestled in the foothills of the Cascades. I had chosen it myself, enchanted by its warm, honey-colored wood, its massive stone fireplace, and the scent of pine and wood smoke that clung to the air. It felt like a place of gentle beginnings. Guests mingled on the wide veranda, their laughter carrying on the crisp evening air as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in strokes of lavender and rose. I felt a quiet hum of pride, watching the beautiful scene unfold, a picture I had helped to paint. I was speaking with Clara's aunt when Clara herself swept towards me, a champagne flute in her hand and a smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Eleanor," she said, her voice a little too loud. "Can I borrow you for a second?" She led me away from the soft chatter of the guests to a corner of the veranda, shielded by a large potted fern. The sun had fully set, and the string lights woven through the rafters cast a golden, intimate glow. Is everything all right, dear? I asked, my brow furrowing with concern. Her smile vanished. It was like a shutter clicking closed, leaving her face cold and hard. I need you to stop, she said, her voice a low, sharp hiss. I blinked, confused. Stop? Stop what? Stop this, she gestured vaguely around us at the inn, the guests, me. Playing the grand benefactor. Flitting around talking to my family like you're the host. Everyone knows you're paying for all this. You don't have to keep reminding them. The words were so unexpected, so laced with a venom I couldn't comprehend, that I felt the air leave my lungs. Clara, I don't understand. I was just talking to your aunt about her garden. You're suffocating us, Eleanor, she continued, her voice rising in pitch. You've controlled every part of this wedding with your money, and now you're trying to control the evening. This is our wedding, not your personal party. Her voice was becoming louder now. A few heads began to turn. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a tide of humiliation. I looked past her, searching for Leo. He was standing by the stone fireplace, talking to his best man. He saw me. Our eyes met for a fleeting second across the room. I saw a flicker of something in his gaze, unease, perhaps, but then he looked away, turning his attention back to his friend, his shoulders slightly hunched. He had seen the confrontation beginning, and he had chosen to look at the floor. That small act, that deliberate turning away, was more painful than any of Clara's cruel words. It was a quiet, devastating betrayal that echoed in the sudden silence of my heart. You've done enough. Clara's voice cut through my shock, sharp as broken glass. Her face was a mask of fury. I think it's best if you leave. Leave? The word was a faint whisper. The music from the string quartet seemed to falter. The murmur of conversation around us died down. In the sudden quiet, her words seemed to hang in the air, magnified and monstrous. Every eye was on us now, a sea of curious, pitying faces. You heard me, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. You're not welcome here. Go home. I stood there, frozen, my small clutch purse held tight in my hands. Inside it was the notebook where I'd kept all my careful plans, and tucked within its pages was the final check for the caterer. A wave of nausea washed over me. I looked at my son again, a silent, desperate plea. Leo, please. Say something. He remained a statue by the fireplace, his gaze fixed on the intricate patterns of the Persian rug beneath his feet. He would not look at me. He would not defend me. He would not even acknowledge me. In that moment, he was a stranger, a man I did not know, standing in the ruins of the world I had built for him. A lump of pure grief, hard and cold as a stone, formed in my throat. I would not cry. I would not give her the satisfaction of my tears. With as much dignity as I could muster, I turned. I walked past the tables of guests, their faces a blur of feigned indifference. The journey from the veranda, through the lodge, and out to the gravel parking lot felt like a mile-long walk of shame. Each step was a fresh wound. I had given them a blank check of love and support, and in return, they had publicly declared me bankrupt. I sat in my car, the engine off, the darkness of the parking lot a welcome shroud. The sound of Clara's voice replayed in my mind, a cruel, endless loop. You're not welcome here. But the deepest cut, the one that I knew would scar, was the image of Leo's averted eyes. He had stood by and let it happen. He had watched her throw me out of the celebration I had created for them, and he had done nothing. My phone began to buzz in the cup holder, its screen lighting up the dark car. Text messages from my sister, from a cousin. What happened? Are you okay? Then one from Clara's mother, Eleanor, please don't make a scene. Come back inside. Not a single message asking what had been done to me. They were all concerned with smoothing things over, with preserving the peace, a peace that had just been shattered at my expense. A sob finally broke free, a ragged, painful sound in the stillness of the car. But it was quickly followed by something else. A cold, quiet clarity was beginning to rise through the grief. It was a feeling I hadn't felt in years, an old, forgotten resolve. They believed I was gentle, and they had mistaken gentle for weak. They thought they could humiliate me, discard me, and still step into the perfect wedding I had purchased for them. No more. The quiet, accommodating woman who had driven to this inn was not the same woman who would drive away. With a hand that trembled only slightly, I picked up my phone. I scrolled past the messages and opened my email, finding the contact information for Amelia, the meticulous wedding planner. My thumb hovered over the call button. I took a deep, steadying breath, held it, and then pressed the screen. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and professional. Eleanor. Hello. I was just going over the final timeline for tomorrow. Everything is looking absolutely perfect. Amelia, I said, my voice surprisingly calm and even. I'm calling to cancel. There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end. I'm sorry? Did you say cancel? Yes, I said, the words solidifying my new reality. Cancel everything. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, all of it. The contracts are in my name. I am terminating them, effective immediately. Eleanor, but tomorrow is the wedding. Are you sure? The cancellation penalties will be. Amelia, I interrupted gently, but with a firmness that left no room for argument. If I am not welcome at the wedding, then my money is not welcome either. By the time I turned the key in my own front door, the trembling in my hands had stopped. The grief was still there, a deep, aching bruise on my soul, but it was now surrounded by a sense of quiet determination. They wanted me gone. Fine. They were about to discover that the entire fairy tale they had constructed was a house of cards, and I was the one holding the foundation. The house was silent, a stark contrast to the hollow ringing in my ears. I didn't turn on the lights, preferring the soft glow of the moon filtering through the living room window. I sat at my antique writing desk, the one I'd inherited from my grandmother, and opened the wedding binder. It was a beautiful thing, bound in pale blue linen, with tabs I had meticulously labeled in my neatest cursive: venue, catering, florals, photography, music. Each section was a testament to my love and my generosity, filled with contracts, invoices, and payment receipts. They had contributed little more than a collection of images from Pinterest and a pervasive air of expectation. Every significant signature, every financial commitment, was mine. My gaze fell on the first tab, the gilded grape. I picked up the phone, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs, and dialed the number for the events manager. Good evening, the Gilded Grape. This is Charles speaking. Hello, Charles. This is Eleanor Vance. I am the contract holder for the Vance Matthews wedding scheduled for tomorrow. Ms. Vance. Yes, of course. We're all set for you. The crew is already setting up the floral arches by the... I'm canceling, I said, my voice soft but unyielding. Effective immediately. A long, weighted pause stretched across the line. Ma'am. Are you certain? Our cancellation policy. There is a substantial non-refundable portion. That won't be an issue, I replied calmly. The contract is clear. The non-refundable deposit is forfeited, of course. As the signatory who paid that deposit, I am exercising my right to terminate the agreement. I had read every line of that contract. I knew my rights. More silence. Then a cautious, professional shift in his tone. Understood, Ms. Vance. I will process the termination of services. Thank you, Charles. I hung up the phone and took a breath. My spine felt a little straighter. One by one, I worked my way down the list. The florist, a boutique shop called Petal and Stem, was next. Then the farm-to-table caterer. Then the photographer, a young woman whose artistic eye I had so admired. Each conversation was a variation of the same theme, shock, followed by a hesitant inquiry about fees, and finally, a quiet acceptance when I calmly asserted my contractual authority. With every call, a painful truth came into sharper focus. Leo and Clara had not merely wanted my support, they had presumed it, entitled to it. This wedding wasn't a shared dream. It was a production I had been expected to direct and finance, only to be cast out before the curtain rose. If my presence was not required, then neither were my resources. As I ended the final call with the string quartet, I allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection. There was no triumph in my heart, only a profound and hollow sadness. Tomorrow, they would awaken expecting to step into their happily ever after. Instead, they would find an empty stage, a silent testament to their own arrogance and cruelty. I was sitting at my desk, looking through the file of scanned contracts on my computer, when the sound of a car door slamming shut outside broke the stillness. Headlights swept across my living room wall. I peered through the slats of the blinds and my heart tightened in my chest. It was Leo's car. I watched as he strode up the walkway, his movements sharp and agitated. A loud, insistent knock echoed through the quiet house. "Mom, open up. I know you're in there." I didn't move from my chair. My hands were clasped in my lap, my knuckles white. Let him wait. Let him wonder. The time for my immediate, unconditional response was over. He knocked again, louder this time, the sound rattling the old wood of the door. "Mom, we need to talk." I remained perfectly still, listening to the sound of my own breathing. He could not demand my audience anymore. The silence stretched. Finally, I heard his voice, muffled and laced with frustration. "You can't do this to us. It's our wedding." A sad, faint smile touched my lips. "No, Leo," I thought. It was my gift. Eventually, the knocking stopped. I waited, my entire body tense, until I heard his car door slam again and the engine roar to life, fading into the night. My phone, which I had placed face down on the desk, began to vibrate violently. I turned it over. A cascade of messages lit up the screen. "Leo, 11:22 p.m. Mom, what the hell is going on? The venue just called me." "Leo, 11:23 p.m. Pick up your phone. You're being completely irrational." "Leo, 11:25 p.m. You're ruining everything out of spite." Ruining everything. The words stung, but they were losing their power. I let the phone buzz again and again. Finally, with a sigh that carried the weight of 30 years of motherhood, I answered. "What are you doing?" Leo's voice was sharp, cracking with a rage I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. "You can't just cancel everything. The guests are arriving tomorrow. People have flown in." "Stop," I said. My voice was low and quiet, a stark contrast to his. "You stood there tonight, Leo. You stood there and you let her humiliate me in front of our family and friends. You let her throw me out, and you didn't say a single word." "I didn't want to cause a scene," he protested, his voice defensive. "Oh, but it was perfectly acceptable for Clara to cause one?" I asked, a tremor of long-suppressed anger in my voice. "Her scene was acceptable, but your defending me would not have been?" There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "Mom, look. Clara was just stressed. You know how she gets." She didn't mean it. "She meant every word," I said, the painful clarity of the moment washing over me. "And so did you, when you said nothing at all." "You're overreacting, Mom." "This is a massive overreaction." Overreacting. The word was a dismissal, a pat on the head to an emotional woman. I paid for the dress on her back. I paid for the roof over her head tonight at that inn. I paid for the food she ate and the champagne she drank before she told me I wasn't welcome. And you stood by and endorsed it with your silence. That is not an overreaction, Leo. That is a fact. "It's our wedding," he shouted, his voice raw. "No," I said, the finality of it settling deep in my bones. "It was my gift to you both. And I am now revoking it." "Mom, please," his voice broke, shifting from anger to pleading. "You can't. We'll lose everything. All the deposits. Clara's a mess. She's in tears. She should have considered that before she decided her future mother-in-law was disposable." As if on cue, a message notification flashed at the top of my phone screen. It was from Clara. I pulled the phone away from my ear to read it. "Clara, 11:31 p.m. You are a vindictive, jealous woman. You've always been threatened by me. Clara, 11:31 p.m. I hope you're happy, ruining your own son's life. Clara, 11:32 p.m. Stay away from us. You are a toxic person." I drew a sharp breath and brought the phone back to my ear. "Are you seeing the messages your fiancé is sending me right now, Leo?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. He muttered something I couldn't hear. "She's just upset," he said finally. "No," I replied. "I think for the first time, she's being perfectly honest about who she is." "Mom." "Goodbye, Leo." I ended the call and placed the phone face down on the desk once more. I sat there in the quiet darkness of my house, my heart aching with a grief so profound it felt bottomless. But beneath the grief, a new foundation was settling. For decades, I had been the family's soft place to land. I had absorbed the shocks, soothed the egos, and paid the bills, all for the sake of a peace that was proving to be an illusion. Tomorrow, their perfect world would be gone, and for the first time, I wouldn't be there to rebuild it for them. The pounding on my front door began just before 9 the next morning. It was a frantic, angry sound that seemed to violate the quiet peace of my Saturday. I was in the kitchen, cradling a mug of tea I hadn't touched, staring out at the gentle mist hanging over my garden. I hadn't slept. "Mom, open this door. We need to talk right now." Leo's voice was strained, ragged. I took a deep, centering breath, set my mug down on the counter, and walked to the door. I turned the lock and opened it just enough to see him. His face was blotchy and pale, his hair a mess. He looked as if he hadn't slept either. Without waiting for an invitation, he pushed the door open and strode inside, Clara trailing behind him like a storm cloud. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her expression was one of pure defiance. "What have you done?" he demanded, his voice echoing in the small entryway. He began to pace my living room, his agitation filling the space. "We have 100 guests waiting for a wedding that doesn't exist. The Gilded Grape has already booked another event this afternoon. The florist's shop is closed. Do you have any idea the humiliation you've caused?" "Yes," I said, my voice calm, my gaze steady. "I imagine it's about a fraction of the humiliation I felt last night." Clara scoffed from the doorway. "Oh, please. Don't be so dramatic." My eyes shifted to her. "Dramatic? You stood in front of 50 of our closest friends and family and ordered me out of my own party. A party I was hosting and paying for. And you," I turned my gaze back to my son, "you let her." "I was trying to keep the peace," he shot back, his hands gesturing wildly. "You were trying to avoid a moment of discomfort," I corrected him gently. "There is a difference. You stood there like a stranger, Leo. You didn't defend me. You didn't even meet my eyes." His face hardened, a shuddered, ugly look clouding his features. "You've always been this way," he said, his voice dropping low and cold. "Controlling everything with your money and your quiet disapproval. This is why Dad left, you know." He couldn't stand it either. The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. My breath hitched. For a moment, the room tilted. This is why Dad left. The old, deep wound, the one I thought had scarred over long ago, was torn open. But as the initial shock subsided, something else rose in its place. Not tears. Not defeat. It was a cold, clarifying anger. "Controlling," I repeated, my voice trembling with a fury that had been dormant for decades. "I have sacrificed for you, Leo. I worked a second job for 10 years after your father left so you would never feel his absence in our finances. I cashed in bonds I was saving for my own future to pay for your university education so you could graduate without debt. The down payment for the condo you and Clara live in? That was a gift from me. I have given you everything I had to give, quietly and without fanfare. And you have the audacity to stand in my house, the house I am still paying the mortgage on by myself, and call me controlling because I have finally refused to pay for my own public disgrace." He flinched, a flicker of shame in his eyes before it was extinguished by defiance. Clara stood silent, her arms crossed, her expression stony. "You have made your choice," I said, my voice now devoid of heat, filled only with a vast, weary emptiness. "You chose her. So, you can let her pay for the wedding she wants so desperately." I walked to the front door and opened it wide, letting the cool morning air sweep in. "I think you should both go now." For a long moment, Leo just stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, as if seeing me for the first time. Then, his face twisted into a skull. He stormed past me without another word, Clara following in his wake. He pulled the door shut behind him with such force that a small painting on the wall rattled against its hook. I sank onto the sofa, my body trembling, not from weakness, but from the adrenaline of a battle I never wanted to fight. The silence that descended was profound. In that silence, I grieved. I grieved for the boy I had raised, the sweet child who had held my hand, and I grieved for the man he had become, a stranger whose face I no longer recognized. By noon, the phone calls from the Flying Monkeys began. The first was from David's sister, my former sister-in-law, Carol. "Eleanor," she began, her voice laced with strained diplomacy. "I just spoke with Leo. He's an absolute wreck. You have to fix this. Fix this." The phrase grated on my ears. "How do you propose I do that, Carol?" I asked quietly. "Reinstate the payments, for heaven's sake. Talk to the vendors. They're young, they make mistakes." Clara was emotional. "But this is their wedding day. You can't let your pride ruin it for them." My hand tightened on the phone. "My pride didn't ruin anything, Carol. Their behavior did." "Oh, Eleanor, you've always been so sensitive. So dramatic. Just be the bigger person here. For Leo's sake. Be the bigger person." The familiar refrain of my life. It meant, be the one who absorbs the pain. Be the one who apologizes for others' mistakes. Be the one who pays and stays quiet. "Thank you for your call, Carol," I said, and ended the call. 5 minutes later, it rang again. A number I recognized with a jolt. David. My ex-husband. "Eleanor," he said, his voice carrying the same impatient, authoritative tone it always had. "Leo called me. He's beside himself. I don't know the details of what happened at the rehearsal, but canceling the entire wedding seems a bit extreme, don't you think?" "Extreme?" My voice was tight. "David, where were you for the last 20 years of his life? Where were you when I was paying for his braces, his school trips, his first car? And where were you last night when his fiancée told me I wasn't welcome at the wedding I paid for? Your son stood by and said nothing." "Let's not drag up ancient history," he said sharply. "This isn't about us. This is about Leo. Just give the kids what they want. Let them have their day. For God's sake, Eleanor, be the bigger person." There it was again. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "That's a lovely sentiment, David, especially coming from you. Goodbye." I hung up before he could respond. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. My face was pale, my eyes shadowed with exhaustion. But I saw something else there too. A flicker of steel. They didn't see me as family. I was a utility. A walking, talking bank account with feelings that were, at best, an inconvenience. And the realization didn't crush me. It liberated me. The love I had given so freely had been taken for granted, mistaken for a weakness to be exploited. They were about to learn that even the quietest love has its limits, and I had finally found mine. The hours that followed were a blur of grief and exhaustion. The adrenaline faded, leaving a deep, profound ache in its place. I sat in the dim light of my living room, the world outside continuing on its axis, while mine had stopped spinning. I grieved for the loss of my son, not to another woman, but to a version of himself I could no longer love unconditionally. I grieved for the years I had spent making myself smaller, quieter, more accommodating, believing that was the price of peace. My phone buzzed intermittently with texts from distant relatives, all variations on the same theme: don't tear the family apart over a misunderstanding. I silenced it and let it lie on the cushion beside me. In the depths of that quiet despair, a memory surfaced, unbidden. It was my own wedding day. I was 23, nervous and hopeful in an ivory-lace dress. David's mother, a formidable woman with a will of iron, had pulled me aside just before I walked down the aisle. "A word of advice, Eleanor," she'd said, her voice crisp. "Men like David need a calm harbor. Don't make waves. A quiet wife is a cherished wife." I had nodded and smiled, taking her words as wisdom. For years, I had diligently avoided making waves, swallowing my own needs, my own voice, until I almost forgot I had one. Sitting there, alone in my silent house, I finally understood. My silence had not been strength, it had been compliance. My quiet nature had been mistaken for a lack of a spine. The woman who had nodded meekly to her mother-in-law was gone. In her place was someone new, someone forged in the fire of this fresh, terrible pain. A strange sense of calm, heavy as granite, settled over me. I rose from the sofa, took my untouched mug of tea to the sink, and washed it carefully. I dried my hands, smoothed my hair, and wiped the tear tracks from my cheeks. Enough. Enough grief. Enough begging for respect from people incapable of giving it. If Leo and Clara thought they could humiliate me, use me, and then simply walk into a fantasy I had built for them, they were about to be sorely disappointed. The following Monday morning, I had an appointment with Anya Sharma. Anya was a lawyer in the city, a woman whose reputation for sharp intellect and unshakable composure was well known. Her office was on the 30th floor of a downtown skyscraper, a serene space of glass and light that felt a world away from the tangled mess of my life. "Eleanor," she said, her voice warm as she gestured for me to sit. "You sounded distressed on the phone. Please, tell me everything." And so I did. I laid out the whole story, from my initial offer to pay for the wedding, to the scene at the rehearsal dinner, Leo's silence, Clara's cruelty, my decision to cancel the vendors, and the subsequent barrage of calls and messages. I spoke calmly, my emotions packed away for the moment, presenting the facts as clearly as I could. Anya listened without interruption, her hands folded on her sleek mahogany desk, her dark eyes thoughtful. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me directly. "Let me be unequivocally clear, Eleanor," she said, her voice precise and reassuring. "From a legal standpoint, you have done nothing wrong. Every contract was in your name. Every payment was made from your accounts. You are the client. The vendors have a contract with you, not with them. They have absolutely no legal recourse." A long, slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding escaped my lips. "But they're telling everyone I've ruined them. What if they try to sue me for damages?" Emotional distress. Anya's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "On what grounds? For revoking a gift? The law does not recognize hurt feelings as a cause for action in this context. If they are foolish enough to have a lawyer send you a letter, you will forward it to me, and I will be delighted to respond." Just then, her assistant buzzed the intercom. "Miss Sharma, I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a Leo Matthews on the line for Ms. Vance. He says it's an emergency." I felt a jolt of anxiety. My gaze flew to Anya. She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Do you wish to speak with him?" "No," I said, the word coming out faster and firmer than I expected. "No, I don't." "Good," Anya said, nodding with approval. "There is nothing you need to say to him right now. Let him marinate in the consequences of his own choices." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker not of anger or sadness, but of power. A quiet, centered strength. I nodded. "You're right." Anya slid a folder across the desk towards me. "I'm going to draft a formal notice of contract termination to be sent to every vendor, just to ensure our paper trail is impeccable. It will reiterate that you are the sole contractual authority and that any attempt to reinstate services by Mr. Matthews or Ms. Croft will be considered invalid." She paused. "And while we're at it, I think we should talk about any other financial entanglements." That's when I remembered. The credit card. The one I'd added Leo to years ago for emergencies, with a card of his own. I rarely used the account myself. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. While Anya began dictating the notice to her assistant, I pulled out my phone, my hands suddenly clumsy, and logged into my credit card account. My breath caught in my throat. The list of recent transactions scrolled before my eyes. A charge from 2 weeks prior, $22,500, exquisite journeys luxury travel. I clicked on the details. It was for a 10-night, all-inclusive honeymoon package at a 5-star eco-lodge in Costa Rica, complete with a private plunge pool and volcano views. Booked under the names Leo Matthews and Clara Croft. My hands began to shake as I scrolled further. $7,800 at Ember and Onyx Fine Jewelry. A charge from last month. For what? His wedding band? Hers? And then there were dozens of smaller, yet significant charges, designer luggage, expensive dinners, spa treatments. All in the weeks leading up to the wedding. All on my card. All without a single word to me. I felt a cold wave of nausea. This wasn't just entitlement. This was calculated, premeditated theft, veiled as dependency. They weren't just letting me pay for the wedding, they were systematically draining my resources, helping themselves to my life savings as if it were their personal trust fund. The pain was so sharp and so deep it was almost physical. It wasn't about the money. It was the breathtaking scale of the deception, the absolute lack of conscience. They had smiled in my face, accepted my generosity, all while secretly pillaging my finances. "Anya," I whispered, my voice hoarse. She finished her call and turned her full attention to me, her expression softening with concern as she saw my face. I turned the phone around and showed her the screen. She studied the statement for a long moment, her calm demeanor hardening into something formidable. "I see," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "This changes things. This is no longer a family dispute. This is fraud." She picked up her phone again. "Cancel his card," she said, looking at me for confirmation. I nodded, feeling numb. "Immediately. And I want to speak with our forensic accounting department. I also want a cease and desist letter drafted. For harassment, defamation, and fraudulent use of funds. Send it via courier to Ms. Clara Croft, with a copy to Mr. Leo Matthews. I want it on their doorstep by morning." As I sat there, listening to her issue a calm, precise series of commands that would protect me, a profound shift occurred within me. The grief and the shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They had mistaken my love for weakness and my generosity for an endless resource. They had not just crossed a line, they had torched the entire map. There would be no more second chances. There would be no more quiet accommodations. They had shown me exactly who they were. And now I would finally show them who I was. I was no longer their mother. I was a woman who was taking her life back.